Tashwallop na Aquatal na Siam na Siya na Honchonitum Art Mosteo Gabriel George Quana Squeak Tenitsan Sathnats Antha Tsleil-Waututh Hualmuch East Tsiatala to Siwan Art at Humathquium e Squotmish e Tsleil-Waututh Ami Tsap Kutquilam at Hualmuch Art Tamuch at Humathquium e Squotmish e Tsleil-Waututh Tanawel Stleitsquans Queequel at Schwallop se Stleitsquans Yachwithit Ulip se Quans Yachwithit. Thank you very much. I'm Gabriel George of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And in my language, the Hunkaminam language, one of the original languages of this land that this beautiful cathedral is on. And in my language, I acknowledge the ancestors of the Musqueam people, the Squamish people, and the Tsleil-Waututh people, and welcomed you to our territories as well. And I reflect on the thousands of years that our peoples have been on this land. My late grandfather talked about hunting on trails that they're named streets down here now. Robson and Thurlow, those were trails that our people used. And the trees were so big down in this area and all over, it would take 10 men holding their hands to go around the base of one of these trees. These are the words that my grandfather left with our family. And I want to sing a song of thanksgiving today. And this pays tribute to the sun, and it pays tribute to the wind. It pays tribute to everything that we take from the earth. It pays tribute to our ancestors and to the Creator. This is our nature song from my family.
Thank you very much. She served her daughters on melamine plates, left the royal albert on the top shelf waiting for good. She read them fairy tales from the little golden can of dead mothers in painful headscarves, trembled page corners with wet fingertips, and kissed each one goodnight. She wrote her awad at the kitchen table, lit her smokes on the stove, burned amber holes in the dark, till every orphan princess was cradled around. She stopped shaking, just enough to stain the lines, to forge their future, and set the table for morning. This poem is called Bullet Points. Passages from We Grow Up, the Macmillan Company, 1939. Page 19. Judy is a good cat. He lives alone in a little red farmhouse. Page 57. Dick is the mailman on the train. He has bags full of letters and packages. Page 62. Jack is a pilot of a big airplane that flies at night. He has a radio. Page 88. A brownie is about a foot high. He lives in a cellar. He has a brown face.
He looks queer, lives in queer places, and does queer things. Page 160. Little Ugly Face lives in an old Indian village. She looks so queer that the children laugh and call her Little Ugly Face. She is sad. She has no friends. She really is not pretty at all. This poem is called Split Infinitive. Nope. No proper words back then to rightly explain how I came to be. My Webster's and World Book were as cruel as my Laurentian colored pencils. No dignified labels for the pigment of my skin, no terms to adequately mark the historic moment a black hand and a white hand could touch each other without somebody going to jail. Now, I live in the half-life of an epithet. Still, I long to know the number 14. Whose lips formed the words natural flesh? Whose pen sketched that iconic logo? Who typeset the snow, sans serif the font, and dropped the U in colored? Who sold out the blue dotted imperial English traced in my 4th grade speller for the tricks of our neighbors to the south? Still, I long to touch the bearded Xanax popping group of 7 holdout, wielding his palette knife, sable brush between his teeth, painting mountains, lakes, and single trees bent and twisting in the wind, alone, wasting away in that snow-bound log cabin with the single puff of chimney smoke. An image I carried daily in my Charlie's Angels backpack and consumed without inquiry. Time has since turned natural flesh to soft peach and Indian red to roan, and I spend much less of it these days telling Nana not to say the word mulatto, while I am often reminded, as time shaves lead-filled notions down to the nub, it leaves behind a splintered rainbow, tinder ready for a spark, for a torch fueled with the good old days, for old-timey words to accidentally reignite. This poem is called Synonyms and Antonyms. You, I, her, the East Indian woman, a black braid twisted at her waist, a sorry sari draped, snow-soaked and raggedy over snow boots, hand-embroidered cuffs, some other mother's cross-stitch, unspun gold, somebody's yellow longing for sun and silk and sandals. Where did you learn to spurn the golden chirp of silver bangles? To the marigold of crimson fingernails? Sometimes, when I'm alone, they call me Packy too. You, I, them, her children, brown eyes, dark and watery, immigrant brown, shit brown, newcomer brown, black hair knotted tight atop their tiny heads, empty spaces, broken milk teeth, curried laughter, laughing words, stranger words. You can't tell if they're boys or girls. When did I learn to hold my breath? Onion, ginger, garlic, cumin, turmeric, coriander, some other woman's crushed tomatoes. Sometimes they ask me if I wash my hair with buttermilk. You, I, her, Nana, beige cardigan smile, heirloom recipe box, coffee-stained clippings, blue-lined index cards, your first-time fidget fingers, simmering water, wide-mouth masons, red rubber canning rings, jangling metal lids, large bowl of skinned tomatoes, her unflinching hand the moment it touches yours. You, I, me, gap-toothed, smiling, already knowing flinching was possible. This is called Homonyms. You said, "Hand me that knife, girl. Handle first." I whispered into my sorry-looking fingernails, prayed you could make Nana's pastry from scratch, keep that shiny blade away from your skin, and stop the chemo shakes enough to cut one finger of shortening into 4 cups of flour. We need our fingers and a little egg and water to hold it together. We need our hands to touch and turn this mixing bowl into a talisman. Just skin and bones, girl. You wink an elbow into my ribs, pray there's time to make a woman of me. But you just scratch the surface of my adolescence. If I'd just stop biting my nails, stand up straight, we wouldn't have to fight tooth and nail to get along. You play Stuck on You for the umpteenth time. Snap your fingers on the downbeat. I count 5, 6, 7, and 8, every scratch on the vinyl. Mutter something foolish like, "Wish you'd keep your hands off my stuff." Till your backhand reminds me I am your stuff. Always under your skin, eyes rolling, all sass and backtalk, till you're itching to skin me alive. I can't stop counting down the days till I graduate and nail down a real job. I'm so full of straight A's, you can't praise me or beat me down. You're too tired to raise a finger and say, don't ever let a man lay a hand on you, girl. You just pass the rolling pin and scratch me off your to-do list. Nana says you damn near scratched the black off, flesh down to the bone. The white coats took years to nail down a diagnosis. Hodgkin's, not hysteria, wearing away your fingertips. When Lionel went #1, you didn't have a prayer. Nor did I really, an unfinished woman, stuck on you, praying for second chances, a white-knuckled life, the surface slightly scratched. I remember to untuck my thumbs to avoid snapping my fingers whenever I get the nerve to throw a punch. The whitecoats say I'll be fine. If you were here, would you paint my nails or nurse me with the back of your hand? My final poem is called Subordinate Clause. Because you were my first book, because yours was my first face, because your first look was sorrow, because your second was love, because I charted your scalp like an atlas, sectioned your hair to the roots with the pointy tip of a tail comb, discovered your pink secret at the crown, and released the ancestral size of fingertips in VO5. Because I studied the slight coffee stain on your side teeth, right next to the fake one in the front, and the soft constellation of tiny black moles on the rise of your right cheek every time you smile. Because I memorized the monthly swell of your breasts and the water bloat of your ring fingers, because I feared the dark potholed alleys of your palms and the black slap of Jesus' sandal against my thigh. Because she was your first book, because hers was your first face, because your first look was sorrow, because her first look was shame, because they called you ugly, because I am your spitting image, because there are no honest poems about dead women, because I wrote every line twisted in the furrow of your brow. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marcus. I want to share a song with you that is an old song, and it's about the resilience, the power of the spirit of human beings. It says, I am meant to be free. I am created to be free. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more weeping, no more weeping, no more weeping over me. And before I'll be a slave. I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. They'll be singing, yeah, they'll be singing, yeah, they'll be singing over me, and before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantel, for the beautiful poetry, and Marcus for your beautiful voice as well. I'm happy to be here and to be part of this event. We have a term in our culture, it's called Yahwithit, and it's different speakers and different families will have different ways of interpreting it. On a literal level, one of the understandings I know about this word is it's to untie things. But our people also commonly refer to the word as healing. And in our culture, we move this way. And when we do that in ceremony and we do that in our gatherings and in our practices, that's what our elders call Yahwithit, to untie, to heal. And as an Indigenous person from this land, I've been affected by many things, and racism is one of those. And I've always found that music, writing, the arts, all of the arts is a language that can transcend many of these harsh barriers that some of our people face in Canada. And in my work, I've reflected on my late grandfather and his life. And, you know, when he was just a young boy, he was forced into residential school. And he was beat on day one for speaking the only language he knew. And then you get to my parents' generation, my late father, Leonard George, and his siblings. They attended the residential schools. And so in my grandparents' generation, many of them spoke 3, 4, 5 languages. Hunkaminam, Squamish. We had a trading language on the coast called Chinook Wawa that was from Alaska down into California. And they spoke English, and some spoke more. And so after that experience with the residential schools, and then it got to my parents' generation, and in our community, only one person spoke one of our languages. And you get to my generation, and nobody spoke any of our languages, and that's a direct result of institutionalized racism. The Hunkaminam language, the language that I was sharing in the beginning, that is from Langley and Maple Ridge down to Vancouver here. That's one dialect of our language. And the upriver dialect is from Langley up into the Fraser Canyon. And then on the island approximately between Nanaimo and Duncan, that's another dialect, Hulkaminam. But it's all one language. And so for my language dialect area from Langley down to here, there are no mother tongue speakers left, and there are no fluent speakers left. And my father attended residential school, and in those schools, they suffered sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, all of these horrendous things because of the color of our skin, because of the language we spoke, because of our ways of being that evolved in one spot over thousands of years. We had complex systems of economy, of law, of medicine, of philosophy, of diplomacy. But through the residential schools, even through the arts, if you look at Hollywood, you don't have to go too far back, and the way that Indigenous people were portrayed in films, so detrimental. It enabled the abuse that happened and that continues to happen. My reserve is 365 acres on the North Shore. Across, our people used to live all over Burrard Inlet, along with Squamish and Musqueam peoples. And in my area where we're at on the North Shore, the criminal justice area includes, I think, Squamish and the Sunshine Coast, and Indigenous youth in that area where my people are currently living make up 35% of the people in the criminal justice system. We come at the bottom of so many statistics. Our education rates, our poverty levels, our incarceration rates. I worked in federal corrections for a while, doing programming, and our Indigenous people do longer sentences at a higher security rating than non-Indigenous offenders for the same crimes. And so, in my work and in my life, as I looked at my grandfather and what he went through, he started to become a bigger and stronger inspiration for me. Because despite his oppressions, despite his abuses, despite everything that he had suffered, later in his life, he came to a place in his work that put him at a high profile. And with that profile, he used it to teach people about our ways, the very people that harmed him. And he did it through the written word, through acting, through singing, through speaking. He became very famous. But even before that, in my work, I've traveled around British Columbia, and every corner I go to, people will come to me and tell me stories that my grandfather had shared when he visited their school and he spoke. And later in his life, he kind of stumbled into acting. My late uncle, Robert George, Bobby George, he worked in some of the studios down here, and they were working on a show, CBC, Caribou Country, and the elder in that show got sick, and they said, "We need an elder." And so my Uncle Bobby, as we affectionately referred to him as, said, "Well, my dad could probably do it." And so they invited him down, and he read, and that was it. And his career was short, but he did a lot of work and he did a lot of work to break down barriers, to bridge gaps. Eventually, he was nominated for an Academy Award for his role in Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman. And many of you know his name as Chief Dan George. Tsleil-Waututh was the ancestral name that he carried. Tsleil-Waututh. And my late uncle and myself received his name, that name, I think back in '96. And a few of my other family carry that ancestral name as well. And despite everything, when I look at my grandfather's work and what he did, there was a speech that he did in 1967, the centennial speech, Chief Dan George, Lament to Confederation. You can find it if you Google it or search it up. And this was at the Empire Stadium in Vancouver. And it was full, and it was broadcast live. And he talked about some of our social history in that, some of the impacts of colonization. But something that he did in that speech that for me was very profound is he talked about his addictions in that speech. In that speech, he said, "I drank the white man's firewater, and I got drunk. I got very, very drunk, and I forgot." And when I look at that, I don't see too many people at a formal event standing up and laying their personal troubles down on the table, their addictions. And those addictions that he struggled with were a direct result of the trauma that he suffered in the residential schools. And so what struck me about that is his vulnerability, that he was willing to be vulnerable in front of the whole world. And that vulnerability allowed him to connect to many people. And that love that he gave out, it still comes back to our family today. We still receive that back. And I wanted to share his story because a big part of what helped him to reconcile within himself and to heal was his understanding of our culture. One of my older sisters in our language would be my schayach. It's my late Uncle Bob's daughter, Lee Miracle. She's an award-winning writer. And she was telling me what our grandmother said to her when she was young. She said, our grandmother told her, when you have hurt inside, you can talk about it, you can write about it, but she said, when you sing and dance, that pain, that trauma that's in your body, every fiber of your being is expressed and comes out in a different kind of communication. And that's what my great-grandmother told my dad as well, that we all have a spirit, and our spirit belongs at home in the spirit world. And so that spirit will get lonely. And my great-great-grandmother said the newcomers called that depression. But she said that's our spirit longing to be home. And we have to feed that spirit. Make it feel at home here on earth until it's our time to go back. And she described that journey as a circle. And so I want to share a song in the spirit of today, a song from my grandfather. It's called we called it the prayer song, my grandpa's prayer song. But in the early 1990s, the chiefs from all of the Coast nations approached our family and asked if it could be used as an anthem. And so I want to sing this Coast Salish anthem, and I want to honor and reflect my grandfather, that it would have been easy for him to turn to anger, but that he was able to use the arts and use our culture for love. And that's the legacy that he left my family, that my father carried, my uncle carried, that my aunts carry, that my grandmother instilled in us. And so this is the Coast Salish anthem. Thank you very much.
I was born in the United States, in the state of Texas, before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and before the Voter Rights Act of 1965. I was born in Jim Crow South, where we had to go to separate restrooms. We couldn't drink out of the same water fountains. I remember one of my earliest memories was we lived on a farm, and so we got in the car and drove to town to buy supplies. And I was sitting on my mother's lap. We got to town, we parked. I was sitting on my mother's lap, and I looked across the street, and there was a huge church about the size of Christ Church. It was built of brick. And I noticed on the outside of it, every few feet, there was these little white signs, because it had a huge parking lot around it. So I asked my mother, what are those signs for? And she said to me, those signs say white only. I guess they were wanting to let us know that we weren't welcomed. As a child, that's the message I got. Even in God's house, I'm segregated. I am not a fully welcomed person. We migrated from Texas to California a few years later. I thought, wow, we're going to go where there's freedom, where there isn't this Jim Crow law. But what I discovered was people will smile, in the West Coast, people will smile in your face and be very, very polite, but behind your back, they do the exact same things that were done to you when we lived in the South. That racism doesn't have to necessarily be some, quote, ignorant, rude, hateful redneck. Racism can also be somebody who's very Christian, very nice, very polite, but they won't rent an apartment to you. Or they don't want you coming to their house for any reason, not to mention dinner or to visit. So I received a further education as I moved west. One of the things I also remember from that time, I used to watch a lot of television, and on PBS there was a show called Back to Africa, and it was hosted by a young woman, a young beautiful black woman by the name of Maya Angelou. And she would teach songs and read poetry and give us historic lessons. She taught me how to dream. Because she would tell us, no matter what your circumstances are, no matter what people out there tell you, you have the power to dream and see your life as bigger and greater and more promising than what those messages out there are telling you. So she taught me to dream. She exposed me to part of Black history, which helped me to grow as a person. One of the poets that she exposed me to was Langston Hughes. I'd like to share this poem by Langston Hughes, and then I'll sing a song. The poem by Hughes is called Dream Variations. The song I want to sing for you is one that came out of when the levees gave way during the Katrina hurricane. And afterwards, when they were volunteers and people were coming from all over to help clean up the debris and also to rebuild those areas that were hit so hard, they sang a song. And so there was many songs that came up, but this particular song really resonates with me, so I'll share that with you. And it's called I Want to Let Life Move Me. Langston Hughes, Dream Variations. To fling my arms wide in some place of the sun, to whirl and to dance till the white day is done, then rest at cool evening beneath a tall tree, while night comes on gently, dark like me. That is my dream, to fling my arms wide in the face of the sun, whirl, dance, whirl, till the white day is done, and then rest at pale evening, a tall, slim tree, night coming tenderly, black, like me. I want to let life move me. I want to let life stir me deep. I want to let life wake me from this ancient sleep. I want to laugh all my laughter. I want to cry all my tears. I want to love the rain as deeply as the sun when it clears. I want to let life move me. I want to let life stir me deep. I want to let life wake me from this ancient sleep. I want to laugh all my laughter. Hey, I want to cry all my tears. I want to love the rain as deeply as the sun when it clears. I wanna let life move me. I wanna let life stir me deep. I wanna let life wake me, yeah, from this ancient sleep. I wanna laugh all my laughter, hey, I wanna cry all my tears. I wanna love the rain as deeply as the sun when it clears.
Good evening, everybody. I'm delighted and honored to be here with you today. It's a beautiful church and a very important occasion to be hearing this wonderful music, powerful words from my fellow poets and musicians. Thanks so much to Christ Church Cathedral and the organizers, to Donna, to James, to Alicia, to everybody here tonight and everybody listening. I'm going to be reading a number of poems. I'm going to start with a poem called Vision. We've heard some very powerful words, some very powerful music tonight. It's important to listen deeply. And it's also important to see, to look into ourselves, to look at our histories. And this poem is about trying to look into ourselves and into our past. Vision. Sting of dilation, past cornea, past iris, through pupil, through lens to retina. Glowing vermilion orb in the night of the ophthalmologist's screen. Flare of optic disc, well of macula, pit of fovea, intricate mosaics deciphering light. No drusen yet, no golden portents of waning vision that flecked my mother's eyes. No signs of war's twisting shadows that sieved and warped our world into sinister landscapes concealing peril. A decade after her death, a flash, sudden dimness. Behind my pupils, wisps of torn vitreous dangle, tattered gauze. But beyond her eyes or mine is the vision I need now to take me high, deep, far. Let words be my telescope to enter the spiral whorls of astral ancestors in deep space or in fingertips. Microscope to travel the delicate labyrinths of cells, or magnifying glass, the simplest lens I can hold, close to petal, pebble, leaf, flake, truth. So my mom grew up during the Second World War, and she experienced a lot of hardship in Hong Kong when it was occupied by the Imperial Japanese soldiers. And because of the war, because the rape of Nanking and all kinds of war atrocities, she had a deep-seated grudge, a racist grudge. And she talked about that when we were growing up. So when I was a child in grade 1, I wanted to have a birthday party and invite all the girls in my class. And one of the girls was a Japanese Canadian named Naomi, and I really wanted Naomi to be at the party. But my mother said she wasn't allowed to come because she was of Japanese descent. So I was very upset about this, and my grade 1 teacher, she saw me looking quite unhappy, and she called me over and said, "What's wrong?" And I told her what was wrong. And she told me, "I want you to tell your mother that the war is over." I was so excited. I had no idea, you know, it was 1945, and it was quite a while ago. So I ran home to my mom and I said, "Hey, Mom, guess what? The war's over. So can I invite Naomi?" And she looked at me and she thought for a while, and she respected teachers and teachers' authority. And she let me invite Naomi, and we had a wonderful birthday party. And after that time, my mother went on to learn Japanese, to learn Japanese flower arrangement, and took us to eat Japanese food. So it was a wonderful story about how simple words can make a difference, and also how deeply entrenched some of those beliefs may be. But we can make a difference. We can change. I'm going to read another poem about coming to Canada when I was a kid. It's a short poem, and it's about how everything is taken from you when you arrive in a new place. Coming to Canada. She has missed the collapse of a universe, the cue for chaos. Shadows of sudden boats, inexplicable trains, voices, smells recostumed, the pull of adult hands. Abruptly, home is presented, a ruse of comfort. Alien faces hover, professing to be family, prodded to perform, scriptless. So when I came, I actually knew English. English is my first language, but it didn't matter. All the customs, all the voices, all the accents were different, and it took a while to adjust, and I have deep sympathy and empathy for all newcomers, whatever their background, when they come and face that huge, wrenching change. Another thing I want to read is about the experience of being a so-called hyphenated Canadian, a Chinese Canadian. And sometimes it means feeling like you're falling through the cracks because you're not one or the other or accepted for who you are. The hyphenated. The left side of the hyphen lives on the side of town you visit with tourists. Smells like parcels from Hong Kong, crammed with clothes you never wear. Eats rice every supper, sometimes 2 days old. It gets you punched in the back by the white boys at school, sworn at by drivers, asked by the neighbors if you've eaten their cat. The right side undoes your top shirt buttons, buys tight jeans, sings the anthem in French, almost fails physics, doesn't practice piano. It bakes brownies and meatloaf and glories in potatoes. In between them, the hyphen fissures your gut so that anything unlabeled tumbles through. It makes your face an imposter's, the gold-toothed smile of the Chinese grandmother seeking help at the store, shutting off as if you've struck her. Your English words empty as spilled teacups. So I believe that whether you're a Chinese Canadian or a Canadian of Chinese descent from Morocco or from Nigeria or from Hong Kong or Mauritius or England or anywhere, you're still Chinese and you're still got that in your ancestry. Whereas I know that some Chinese people from China would see someone like me as the hollow bamboo, or call me a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. But I think we're all complex people. We're more than our race, we're more than our gender, we're more than our age, we're more than our skin color, we're more than our 2 legs, we're much, much more. And those meanings of who we are shift within the context and within time. That mutability is actually quite a magical thing. Although some people don't always recognize that. And not every person of color is an immigrant. There are people who are of African descent, Black Canadians whose ancestors have been here longer than many others who have been here since the 1700s with the United Empire Loyalists. They're Chinese Canadians whose families have been here since the 1800s, the 1900s, Japanese Canadians who were here before the First or Second World War. Their descendants are not immigrants. So we can't assume that everybody with a brown face is an immigrant. So I want to read you a poem about that question that we often get about where are you from? A very dangerous question to ask because it has some assumptions embedded in it. It's interesting, my mother, she had a very thick Chinese accent. She could speak Mandarin and Cantonese and English. Who knows, maybe she spoke some Gaelic as well from living in Scotland for 10 years. But she really wanted English to be our first language because she was so self-conscious about her own thick accent. And she knew about those rigid assumptions that people would make about an accent, that they would assume that you weren't smart or intelligent and so forth. So we grew up speaking English and English only. Okay, where are you from? And there's a short epigraph by Jackie Kay. Jackie Kay is the poet laureate, or the Scots Makar of Scotland. She is half Nigerian and half Caucasian and was adopted by a white family. And she says, I still have Scottish people asking me where I'm from. They won't actually hear my voice because they're too busy seeing my face. She has a very thick Scottish accent. I used to have a really thick Scottish accent too. I don't have it obviously anymore. Where are you from? They ask. I tell them, listen to my voice. But they can't hear past my deafening skin, the imagined thunder of other that rumbles over whatever I utter. Honed consonants, polished vowels, my multisyllabic hints and subordinate clauses, enunciated with scintillating clarity. If I sang, Terre de nos aïeux, what would they hear but the broken English of their own projections, collaged from caricatures in outdated sitcoms and 50s movies on permanent loop. Blinded by my Asian eyes, they keep on speaking, just loud enough to cross a non-existent ocean. Every word trundling in solicitous slow-mo, as if I were 3 or 300. So sometimes that happens. Since the pandemic began, it's been a difficult time if you're an Asian Canadian, or an Asian American for that matter. There have been 1,500 anti-Asian hate incidents reported in the US since the start of the pandemic, including the stabbing of a father and his 2 young kids in Texas. And the father and the kids were Burmese. The white young man who stabbed them thought they were Chinese and the source of the coronavirus. In Canada, there have been 600 anti-Asian incidents reported across 7 provinces, with BC having more incidents per capita than any other region in North America. And Asian Canadian women have reported 70% of those incidents, ranging from verbal abuse in the form of racial slurs or threats or derogatory remarks. 30% of the incidents have involved physical violence or assault, including being coughed at or spit at or punched or shoved. The statistics, you can find them on the website of Project 1907. It's a nonprofit group named after the anti-Asian riots that happened in Vancouver in 1907. The Vancouver Police Department have had 77 hate files opened since the beginning of the year, a big increase from the past, with all kinds of unprovoked attacks that go beyond just mental illness, and probably spurred on by the social media and other beliefs. So Dr. Bonnie Henry has urged us to be kind, to be calm, and to be safe. But even so, there are many people of Asian descent who do not feel calm or safe right now, given the extent of antipathy around the globe, anxious and vulnerable to assault, verbal or otherwise, and many are even afraid to leave the house. And for a long time, in the early part of the pandemic, I felt afraid, looking at people coming towards me if they were white, if I was going to get the evil eye, a hostile glance, or worse, and I would wait for my husband to walk with me so that no one would dare to attack, which is a pretty sorry state to be in. There have been so many incidents in the news of that elderly man, a great-grandfather, 77 years old, with dementia, wandered into a 7-Eleven and then got railed at and shoved and pushed to the ground by a fellow young women who've been punched suddenly. And what's really appalling is that people who are just perceived as Asian, there have been Inuit people in Montreal told to go back to where they came from because they were perceived to be Asian. There was a young First Nations woman who was walking her dog in East Van, and she got punched in the face and assaulted because she was perceived to be Asian and called anti-Asian epithets. So there are all kinds of nasty epithets, but I didn't really want to use any of them as a basis of a poem. I don't want to repeat them or give power to those people who use them. But I did want to talk about one phrase that I've heard even before the pandemic, and that is go back to where you came from, or go back to where you come from. Go back. They shout, "Go back to where you come from." And suddenly, I'm on the train, lurching along rails, ribboning through mountains and prairie, across the Canadian Shield, past the rippling Great Lakes, to the clang and bustle of Montreal, to board the Empress of Canada, dwarfed by ocean liner pomp and glitter, carving through the Atlantic back to Liverpool Harbor. Then, lulled by the rhythm of train tracks on a return ride to Scotland, a 2-story stucco duplex, a hospital in Paisley, to be enfolded in the warm cushioning of my mother's womb, incubating a reverse gestation, fetus shrinking into blastocyst, into embryo, into zygote, into cells, dismantled DNA, double helix strands awhirl in nucleotide roulettes. They shout, "Go back to where you come from." Vancouver, Paisley, Scotland, or the arms of ancestors, Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Vietnam, or eons back to Africa, the origin of everyone. Go back to where you come from means bleach myself, erase myself, means anywhere but here. They want to rip me from my home, yet we are both guests. I am very grateful to be on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and we are guests. Even friends have hinted about wet markets and pangolins. I didn't even know what a pangolin was until the pandemic began. And those kinds of comments ignore the fact that there's commonality, there's universality here. We are all responsible for climate change. We are all responsible for what's been happening to our ecosystems. If we wear polyester, if we eat factory-farmed meat, if we drink from plastic bottles of water. We're all implicated, we're all complicit, but we can change that. We can make a difference. We can end that harm. To end with, I want to end on a very short poem by a Zen monk and poet from the 1300s, Ikkyu, from Japan. Rain and hail, snow and ice are divided from one another, but after they fall, they are the same water of the stream in the valley. Thank you very much.
I'd like to just express my gratitude for all of you who are here in the building who have come to this evening and of music and spoken word and poetry. I really appreciate you coming out and being present. And I also want to say that I'm really grateful to share this evening, share this space, this stage with Gabriel and with Fiona and with Chantel. And a special thank you to Donna Wong Giuliani for conceiving of this idea and for sponsoring it. And also thank you to Christ Church Cathedral and to the faith community that supports this space and holds it and makes it possible for us to partake in these kinds of events. So I just want to say thank you for that. I was really enjoying much of what was being said. It was bringing back memories for me. I came to Canada just before Expo 86, before Vancouver changed from being like a small, big city to suddenly the part of the world stage in a major way. I actually felt like I watched the city slowly speed up as Expo went on. Before it was kind of slow and there was this sort of rhythm to it, and it just got faster and faster and faster and crowded and more crowded. But one of the experiences that I had when I first came here, I remember getting in a cab. I don't know where I was going at the time, and of course I got that question, where are you from? So I said, because he said, where are you from? Africa? And I said, no, I'm from the States originally. And then he said to me, aren't you glad to be in Canada where there's no racism? And I was taken aback, but I was sort of didn't quite know how to answer, and it was almost like it was divinely planned. At that very moment, somebody cut him off in traffic, and he said this really loud expletive, and then started talking about Chinese people can't drive. And I thought, oh, there's no racism in Canada. Okay, I get it. And I was also, before the concert this evening, I was speaking with Gabriel, and I was just appreciating how much I'm learning about the experience of Indigenous and Native people here and what their journey has been like. Yeah, the racism here is different than the way it's expressed differently than it's expressed back in my former homeland. So it feels different to me, but I recognize it for what it is. But I was saying to Gabriel, sometimes I feel like a bit of a spy, because in the same way as with that cab driver, I have had many situations where I've been sitting at a pub or whatever and having a conversation with people, with non-native people, and the conversation would somehow something would come up about something happening in the Indigenous community, and then I would just listen to all of this stuff coming out about how, you know, they should pay this and they shouldn't do this, and there was the same kinds of judgments and racism being expressed, but they thought, well, they can say it to me because I'm from the States, and of course, that's where the real racism is. You know, Canadians are very proud, many Canadians are very proud about saying we don't have slavery and we don't have racism, but it's here. It expresses itself differently, but it's still here. And I also want to just acknowledge as well, being a person who's part of the LGBTQ community, there's also that kind of discrimination that goes on as well. You can't call it racism because it's not about race, but it is about judgment, it is about exclusion. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. The song I want to sing for you, actually, I wished that you could sing with me, but I know because of, thank you for keeping us safe. I know we can't sing together, but in your heart, sing with me. This is a song that was written by a Black Canadian icon. His name is Oscar Peterson. And the song is called Hymn to Freedom. And I guess those who are live streaming this can sing at home. But here I ask you, just in your hearts, join in as I attempt to sing this song. And just very simply, it's not this particular, singing now is for me not about performance, but just about sharing the truth of, the beauty of this work by this Canadian icon. When every heart joins every heart and together yearns for liberty, that's when we'll be free. When every hand joins every hand and together molds our destiny, that's when we'll be free. Any hour, any day, the time soon will come when we will live in dignity, that's when we'll be free. When everyone joins in our song and together singing harmony, that's when we'll be free. Any hour, any day, the time soon will come when we will live in dignity, that's when we'll be free. When everyone joins in our song and together singing harmony, that's when we'll be free. God bless you. Thank you.